Jake Coleman pulled into his driveway just after midnight, the gravel crunching beneath his tires. As his headlights swept across the front of his 2-story colonial, the familiar sight should have brought a sense of peace. After 3 days away, in the mountains, but something immediately felt off. His garage door was closed. Not strange in itself, except Jake distinctly remembered leaving it open, just slightly, to help air out a paint project from the weekend before. Now it was sealed shut, like nothing had ever happened. He pressed the garage remote. Nothing. The light blinked, but the door didn't budge. He frowned and stepped out into the cool night air, walking over to the side keypad. When he punched in the code, the door let out a low groan and began to lift. As the light flickered on from above, Jake's breath caught in his throat. 2 enormous black trucks, Ford F-250s, spotless and gleaming, sat parked inside his garage. Both were angled with military precision, completely filling the space where his workbench and camping gear had been. Gone. All of it. What the hell? He muttered. Stepping cautiously inside, he sniffed the air. No scent of oil, no gasoline, leaks. They were spotless, almost staged. On the windshield of the truck on the right, taped at an odd angle, was a letter. It was printed in a flowery cursive font and bordered with clip art vines. He plucked it off. Dear resident, thank you for complying with Article 7, Section 3B. Garage parking visibility enforcement. The vehicles will remain temporarily until community inspection is complete. Your cooperation is noted and appreciated. Karen D. HOA President. Jake's eyebrows shot up. HOA. His house wasn't even in an HOA. That was part of the reason he bought it. Privacy. No random fines for not mowing his lawn on a Tuesday. And no one measuring the height of his trash cans. His eyes scanned the garage. There was no sign of forced entry. The side door was still locked. The window was intact. But his storage racks were gone. Everything had been rearranged, scrubbed, made to look clean. The space looked like a display in a showroom, not a lived-in garage. He slowly backed out and walked the perimeter of his house with a flashlight, checking every window, every door. Nothing broken, nothing open. The place was quiet, still. Jake re-entered the house through the kitchen, locked the door behind him, and sat at the dining table in silence. His mind raced. Was this some kind of mistake? Did someone confuse his house for another? He pulled up his phone and searched the name on the note. Karen D., HOA President, popped up immediately, attached to dozens of community forum posts, neighborhood Facebook rants, and even a local news story from 2 years ago about a woman who fined her neighbors for planting unauthorized sunflowers. Jake leaned back in his chair, the note still in his hand. One line on the printed letter chilled him the more he read it. Until community inspection is complete. What inspection? Who had come into his home? How did they get in? Then it hit him. The garage opener. Could someone have installed a keypad while he was away? Or worse, had it always been there, hidden from view? Jake's phone buzzed. A text from his neighbor, Claudia, next door. Hey, weird question. Are you storing HOA stuff now too? His pulse quickened. 2. The trucks weren't a mistake. They were part of something bigger. Something he hadn't signed up for, and he had a feeling Karen wasn't done. Jake barely slept. Every creak in the house had him checking locks and peeking through blinds. When the morning sun filtered through his blinds, he was already on his 3rd cup of coffee and staring at the garage camera feed he'd set up just hours earlier. Nothing yet, but he had a feeling that wouldn't last. The trucks were still there, parked like squat sentries inside his own garage. He hadn't dared touch them. Not yet. He wanted proof first. something solid, and maybe a name. He went back to the letter and focused on the signature. Karen D., HOA president. A quick search online brought up exactly what he feared. A full digital dossier on the woman. Karen Dorsey, president of the Silver Palms HOA, a neighborhood 3 streets over, separated from his by an old fence and a stretch of privately owned land. That HOA had a reputation for being intense. One Reddit thread was titled, Karen of Silver Palms, HOA or cult. According to the post, Karen ran her HOA like a shadow government. She'd find a man for painting his shutters beige instead of approved sand. She once banned basketball hoops because the clanging interrupted HOA meditation hours. One particularly viral video showed her measuring a lawn with a ruler and snapping photos while muttering, "Violation! Violation! Violation!" Jake sat back, the pieces starting to form an ugly picture. This wasn't some random trespass. Karen had chosen his home. But why? His phone buzzed again. Another message from Claudia. Claudia, talk to Rick on Pinewood. He says Karen uses his shed for temporary landscaping equipment. She gave him a fake city order. You two, Jake's stomach turned. So this was a pattern. Karen was quietly commandeering properties. Was she expanding her HOA, building some kind of unspoken empire? He pulled up the city parcel maps. His house, 218 Cedar Ridge, was not within the Silver Palms HOA boundary, but it was close. Too close. He leaned in closer. His lot was outlined in blue. Private, unaffiliated. But someone had recently marked it in yellow on the county zoning overlay. The label, Pending Oversight Zone, Type B. What the hell is a Type B? He cross-referenced it with zoning codes. Type B was a classification used for lots under review for administrative inclusion into private governing associations, pending owner response. Owner response. But Jake had never gotten a single notice. Was she trying to absorb his house into the HOA without consent? The doorbell rang. Jake jumped, knocking over his coffee. He grabbed a towel and wiped it up quickly before heading to the door. Through the peephole, a delivery guy holding a stack of envelopes. Jake opened the door slowly. Morning, the delivery man chirped. HOA inspection packets for this address. 2 inspection badges, decals for vehicle compliance, and a bin permit. You'll need to sign. I'm not part of the HOA. Jake interrupted. The delivery man paused. This is 218 Cedar Ridge, right? Yeah. Then you are now, he said, handing Jake a clipboard with a signature line already labeled, New Transfer Acceptance. Jake didn't sign. Instead, he took the packets and shut the door. He opened the top envelope. Inside, a bright yellow decal that read, Silver Palms HOA, Garage Compliance Vehicle, Approved. It had the license plate number of one of the trucks in his garage. That's when Jake noticed something even stranger on the form beneath it. At the bottom was a small box, marked Resident Signature, already filled in. Jake stared at it. It was his name, written in his handwriting, but he'd never signed it. Someone had forged his signature. And suddenly he realized, this wasn't about trucks. It was about control. By that evening, Jake had reviewed the forged signature a dozen times. Same loops, same slant, even the hesitation at the end of his last name. It was disturbingly accurate, almost like whoever signed it knew how his hand moved. He called the city zoning office, demanded clarification on the pending oversight zone. After waiting 30 minutes on hold, a tired voice on the other end said, Oh, you're in the new satellite overlay. Yeah, we've had several forms filed by a Karen Dorsey. You're showing as HOA adjacent. HOA adjacent? Jake repeated. I own this property. I never consented. Doesn't matter if she submitted the 18Z form and 3 resident validations. That's enough to trigger the transitional zone review. Jake felt his throat tighten. 3 validations. Who else signed? The voice rattled off 2 names. Neighbors he didn't even know. And one that sent chills through him. Jake Coleman. She'd forged him twice. When he got off the phone, Jake didn't waste a second. He sprinted to the garage, climbed onto a ladder, and inspected every corner for signs of tampering. And there it was. Tucked into the rafters, a second keypad bolted just under the lip of the siding. Wires disappeared into the wall, neatly routed like they'd been there for years. He hadn't installed this. The previous owners must have been complicit. Or tricked. He pried it off with a screwdriver, yanking the wires out. Then he turned to the trucks. He wasn't going to wait anymore. He opened the door to the nearest F-250. It wasn't locked. The interior was spotless. Plastic still covering the seats. A clipboard sat on the passenger seat. He grabbed it. It was a checklist. Garage. Site 7B. Temporary storage. Weeks 1-3 confirm perimeter. Access record inventory. Photos. Verify resident compliance. Forgery noted. Schedule transition team inspection. At the bottom in small print. If resident protests, initiate phase 2. Do not alert. Authorities. Jake stepped back. Phase 2. His phone buzzed. It was his new security app. Motion detected. Garage. 2:14 a.m. He stared at the screen, stunned. The feed was live, and the garage door was opening from the inside. The keypad wires were cut. The door remote was on his keychain. No one else should have had access. And yet, there she was, a woman in her 50s, short blonde hair, clipboard in hand, wearing a reflective vest, labeled Silver Palms HOA. She entered like she owned the place, checked off items on her sheet, then opened the tailgate of one of the trucks. Inside were clear plastic bins. Not tools, not papers, but personal items from Jake's garage. His drill, his camping stove, his grandfather's old hammer. She hadn't just used the space. She'd rearranged his life. Jake whispered to himself, "She's robbing me under the name of policy." Then without warning, she looked directly into the camera. Her expression didn't change. She calmly pulled a pen from her pocket and held it up to the lens. Written on the side was a word in red marker. Phase 2. The feed went black. Jake stood frozen, his mind racing. This wasn't a delusional HOA president anymore. This was someone systematically stealing homes, one garage at a time, and he had just become her next test subject. Jake stared at the blank camera feed, heart hammering in his chest. Karen had looked directly into his surveillance. That wasn't carelessness. It was intentional. A message. Phase 2 had started. He paced the kitchen, scanning every outlet and vent, wondering if there were more hidden devices, more quiet invasions. He picked up his phone, ready to call the police, but then stopped. What would he even say? A woman forged my signature, parked trucks in my garage, and now she's silently absorbing my property into an HOA I'm not part of. Yeah, that sounded insane. Instead, he texted Claudia again. Jake caught her on camera. She was in the garage, middle of the night, went through my stuff. Claudia. Holy crap. She did the same to Rick. He filed a complaint. 2 days later, his shed burned down. No evidence. Jake stared at the message. A cold sweat broke out down his neck. Then another message came through. Not from Claudia. From an unknown number. Meet me at the dog park. 8 p.m. Don't tell anyone. It's about Karen. Bring the clipboard. Jake blinked. The clipboard. It was still in his hands. Was this a trap? Or someone else like him? At 8 p.m. sharp, Jake pulled into the empty lot beside the overgrown dog park. The lamps flickered overhead, like a horror movie set. He waited inside his car until he saw a figure step out from behind the cinder-block bathroom building. Hoodie, gloves, dark jeans. The person waved him over. Name? Jake called out cautiously. Lena, the woman said. I used to live on Cypress Drive. Jake kept his distance. Used to. She put a storage pod on my driveway. Lena said, voice low and quick. Said it was HOA registered. Next week she put another. Then a notice showed up in my mailbox saying I'd agreed to shared property realignment. I went to protest and found my front door's smart lock changed. I couldn't even get inside my own house. Jake's blood ran cold. She took your house. She's not just running an HOA, Lena said. She's running a hostile property takeover operation. Quiet, legal looking. By the time people realize what's happening, she's got signatures, documentation, and a building full of storage trucks claiming squatters' rights. She uses garage space as the start. Once it's entered into her enforcement database, it's like a virus. She expands inward. Jake handed her the clipboard. This was in the truck. Lena flipped through it fast, her gloved fingers, scanning the checkboxes. Then she froze. Your site 7B. That's huge. She usually doesn't assign letter designations, unless she's preparing to demo part of the structure. Jake's heart sank. Demo? She's prepping to claim the entire back half of your property, probably using some shell LLC. There's a permit number here too. I bet it's already been submitted to planning under false pretense. Then Lena did something strange. She held the clipboard to her phone and snapped a picture. Jake noticed a sticker on the back of her phone case. Cedar Watch. Property Freedom League. You're part of some group. We're small, but we've been watching her, gathering proof. Problem is, she's got someone inside the zoning office. Every time we file a complaint, it disappears. Then how do we stop her? Lena gave him a serious look. You don't stop Karen through the courts. You out her. Publicly. Loudly. Expose the scam. The cameras. The forged signatures. Everything. But it has to be before she completes phase 2. Jake swallowed hard. And if I'm too late, Lena looked him straight in the eye. Then next week, you'll come home and find your locks changed. And a stranger living in your bedroom, holding an approved occupancy certificate. Jake drove home from the dog park like he was being followed. He checked his mirrors constantly, watching for suspicious headlights or black SUVs. None appeared. But his gut didn't relax. Not even when he parked outside his house and stared. At it, his garage, his lawn, his life. All looking normal on the surface, but now he knew better. Karen's control was a cancer creeping beneath the paint. Inside, he sat down and printed every document Lena had emailed. Forged forms, HOA policy fakes, and a list of known converted properties. Site 7B, his home, was listed right under Site 6E. Claudia's address. Wait. Claudia, he stared at the screen. Claudia, his friendly neighbor, had been texting him tips, warning him, but she'd already been marked. No, it was worse. Claudia hadn't warned him until after the trucks appeared. And every tip she gave led him deeper into confusion. Jake dialed her number. Hey, Jake, she answered quickly, too quickly. Did you find anything new? He kept his voice calm. Yeah, I did some digging. Turns out I'm listed as a full compliance property. Phase 2. You ever hear of that? A pause. Barely a breath. I think Rick mentioned it, she said. Before his shed, burned down. Jake narrowed his eyes. Right, and you said you weren't in the HOA either, yeah? Of course not. Why? I just find it strange, Jake said evenly, that your name appears on the validation form that helped them add my house into the transition zone. Another silence, longer this time. You looked at the paperwork, she asked, and her tone changed. It wasn't fear, it was disappointment. Jake's voice dropped to a whisper. It was you, wasn't it? You're the third validation signature. Claudia didn't deny it. Instead, she sighed. Jake, I was trying to help you adjust. If you just signed the acceptance, it would have gone smoothly. You wouldn't even notice the change. They'd waive your dues for the first year. Jake stood slowly, heart pounding. You're in on this. They gave me back my fence line, Claudia said coldly. They cleared my violations. My property value jumped 20% overnight. All I had to do was sponsor one new house. One? Jake snapped. So I'm a recruitment target. Not a target, she corrected. A member. You just haven't accepted it yet. Jake hung up. He didn't even sit down. He grabbed his keys, shoved the clipboard into a backpack, and ran to his car. He wasn't staying here tonight. He peeled out of the driveway and drove to Lena's safe house. An old florist shop turned into a hidden operations center. She buzzed him in through the back. You look pale, she said. Let me guess. Someone close to you flipped. Claudia, Jake said bitterly. She validated the transition. She's in deep. Lena cursed. That's how Karen grows her. Map. Not just trucks and forms. She recruits. Weak-willed neighbors sell each other out for new gutters and clean records. We call them compliance brokers. Jake dumped the clipboard on the table. We need to act. Fast. She's weeks ahead. Lena nodded grimly. Then it's time to burn this whole HOA fantasy down. She slid him a folder titled Operation Unwelcome Mat. A digital assault plan. Data leaks. Anonymous tip-offs. Zoning violations pushed to local media. Karen's empire, brick by brick, would be dismantled by exposure. But first, Lena warned. Jake had to retrieve the original Phase 2 schematic from the trucks in his garage. Without that, she said, Karen can rewrite the entire paper trail. If she files Site 7B as complete, not even the cops can get you back inside. Jake stared at her, back into the garage, where the door opened on its own at 2:14 a.m. Jake parked 2 blocks away from his own house. It was just past midnight. Streetlights flickered, and wind pushed dry leaves in uneasy circles. His garage loomed. Head like a tomb. Quiet, dark, and not his anymore. Dressed in black, Jake moved fast across his neighbor's yard, slipped through the side gate, and crouched behind the hedge. From this angle, he could see the garage side door. Still locked, untouched, but the keypad near the main entrance had been replaced. Sleeker, cleaner. Karen had upgraded. Jake pulled out the decryption tool Lena had given him, a modified garage signal scrambler. He pointed it at the keypad and watched the lights flicker. After a few nerve-wracking seconds, the panel blinked green. Click. He opened the door slowly and stepped inside. The trucks were still there, still pristine, but now they smelled faintly of bleach and some kind of chemical adhesive. The floor was freshly mopped. The bins inside the bed of truck number 1 were gone, replaced with file cabinets bolted to the side walls. Jake's breath caught. This wasn't storage anymore. It was an office. He opened the first drawer. Blueprints. Entire property plots from the neighborhood. Each one marked with red lines indicating adjusted lot boundaries. Notes in Karen's handwriting scrolled across them. B perimeter, to absorb 7A and 7C side easements. Rezone under Silver Pam's phase extension. Next drawer. Surveillance photos. Photos of him, in his kitchen, in his yard. One even showed him installing the new camera system last week. These weren't from his devices. These were external, long range. Karen had eyes on him before he ever noticed the trucks. Jake's hands trembled. This was bigger than enforcement. It was stalking. Then he saw the red folder. It was buried under a fake HOA handbook, labeled in thick Sharpie. Phase 2, schematic, 7B primary file, hard copy only. This was it. He grabbed the folder, stuffed it in his backpack, and the garage door began to open, again on its own. Jake dived behind one of the trucks, just as light spilled in from the rising panel. 2 figures entered. A woman in the familiar HOA vest, clipboard in hand, and a man wearing a reflective safety jacket. Karen Jake held his breath. He could hear their footsteps echoing in the still space. His phone buzzed in his pocket. A message from Lena. They know. Claudia tipped them off. Get out now. Karen's voice cut through the air. According to the compliance report, he hasn't left the zone yet. He's probably just paranoid. Thinks a folder will stop the process. The man snorted. They always do. By the time he realizes his title's already been cloned, we'll be prepping the living room for open house tours. Jake's blood went ice cold. Clone title. Karen walked closer to the truck. Her fingers tapped against the side. You know, she said, not looking around. I always give residents a chance to come quietly. Most of them don't. They choose panic. They choose resistance. Then she turned, stared right at the truck Jake was hiding behind. But we don't tolerate delays. She snapped her fingers. A 3rd figure entered, carrying a black duffel bag. He opened it slowly, revealing a portable lock drill and a stack of eviction placards. One had Jake's name on it, already printed, already signed. Karen smiled. Let's install the front sign tonight. Make it official by morning. Jake's hand clutched the folder inside his pack. If he didn't move now, they'd find him. If he did, he'd expose himself. But either way, they were declaring war. Jake stayed frozen behind the truck, sweat slicking his palms, as Karen and her goons circled the garage like predators laying traps. The eviction placard with his name on it now sat atop a metal folding stand, like a gravestone waiting to be planted. He couldn't breathe. One wrong noise and it was over. But then, his phone buzzed again. Lena! Garage feed looped for 3 min. Move. He didn't hesitate. Jake sprang up and sprinted for the side door, backpack slamming against his spine. Karen shouted something, a sharp, guttural command, but he was already out and racing through the yard. A dart of light flashed past him. A stun gun, a taser. He didn't look back to find out. He vaulted the fence, stumbled into the neighbor's flower bed, then sprinted down the street until Lena's grey van pulled up. Side door already open. Go! She yelled. He dove inside and they peeled off. Into the night. Only when they were 3 blocks away did Jake finally breathe. He pulled the Phase 2 schematic from the bag and handed it to Lena. She stared at it, stunned. You actually got it. This is everything. Not everything, Jake panted. They said my title's already been cloned. Lena's face darkened. Then we're out of time. Tomorrow morning, they'll file for occupancy under an emergency transfer clause. It's the final step. If we don't stop it before 8 a.m., legally, you're not the owner anymore. Jake's voice was steel. Then we stop it. She nodded slowly, already flipping through the folder. There's something here that might help. Look, this clause. It only activates if 3 signatures verify compliance. Jake leaned over. Like Claudia's. Exactly, Lena said. But we just got proof those signatures were forged or coerced. If we can present that publicly before the filing, we can freeze the transition. Jake sat back, the plan forming in his mind like lightning. We go nuclear, he said. We drop every document, every file, every surveillance photo. We post it all to everyone, and we hit the zoning board, HOA watchdogs, and City Hall at once. A full-on info strike. Lena grinned. You ready for that kind of chaos? He zipped the backpack closed with a snarl. She brought this to my garage. I'm ready. By 4 a.m., they were inside Lena's safe house. It looked like a war room now. 6 laptops open. A corkboard with property lines and red strings. Jake scanned the wall where Karen's face stared back at him in a blown-up DMV photo. Lena's team, a mix of whistleblowers, tech nerds, and ex-HOA victims, worked fast. They built a site titled HOA Hell, the Karen Files. A digital grenade. Before launch, Lena looked at Jake. Last chance. Once we go live, she'll know we've gone public. No more hiding. Jake clicked publish. Instantly, the site went live. So did the mass email. To every homeowner in the subdivision. To the city's zoning department. To 3 local reporters. And to Karen. Within 5 minutes, Jake's phone rang. Unknown number. He let it go to voicemail. Karen's voice played back. Eerily calm. You're making a mistake. Do you really think that little web page will stop us? Property flows where power lies, and you have none. Then, almost affectionately, but I'll see you at 8 a.m., Jake. We have your final inspection scheduled. And this time, we're bringing the sheriff. Jake's eyes met Lena's. She's doubling down. Lena smiled grimly. Then we better make sure the sheriff sees everything. The dawn sky was a cold grey as Jake parked 2 blocks from his house. His phone buzzed with non-stop messages. Reporters asking for interviews, neighbors sending support, and city officials promising to investigate. But none of that mattered until Karen arrived. At exactly 7:45 a.m., a convoy pulled up, a sheriff's SUV, followed by 2 uniformed deputies, and Karen in her usual HOA vest, clipboard in hand, radiating smug control. Jake stepped out of the shadows, backpack slung over one shoulder, clutching a printed copy of the Phase 2 schematic. Karen's eyes flicked to him. Ah, Jake. Right on time. The sheriff gave Jake a sharp look. We're here to ensure the inspection goes smoothly. Jake's jaw tightened. I'm here to prove this inspection is a sham. Karen smiled thinly. You're welcome. To try. They moved toward the garage. Karen gestured grandly. This is where compliance was initiated. 2 trucks illegally parked. Proof of unauthorized use. The property lines were adjusted legally after multiple signatures. Jake held up his folder. Except these signatures were forged, and this entire HOA enforcement is a fraud. Karen's smile faltered for just a second. The sheriff's eyes narrowed. Lena and several neighbors appeared behind Jake, holding copies of the documents, photos, and videos from the website. The crowd grew quickly. Neighbors curious, reporters arriving, phones recording every word. This is evidence of criminal activity, Jake said loudly. Forgery, illegal property seizure, intimidation. You cannot just take someone's home with paperwork and trucks. The sheriff took the folder, flipping through the documents. Where's the original permit? Karen's confident facade cracked. The permit is pending final approval. Lena stepped forward. That's a lie. It was never filed. It's a fabrication. The sheriff's radio crackled. A dispatcher's voice cut through. Dispatch to sheriff's office. New info on Karen Thompson. Reports of fraudulent HOA practices are being investigated by the district attorney. We're advised to hold all enforcement actions until further notice. Karen's face paled. Jake smiled. Looks like your empire's about to crumble. Before Karen could react, a uniformed city inspector arrived, holding official documents stamped with red ink, by order of the city planning department. All Phase 2 activities in this subdivision are suspended until a full audit is completed. Karen stammered, visibly shaking. This is a misunderstanding. The sheriff nodded to Jake. You did good, son. The crowd cheered. Karen turned sharply and fled into her SUV. Tires screeched as she sped away, leaving her 2 trucks and her false claims behind. The twist is, the adrenaline faded. Jake noticed a figure standing quietly by the sidewalk. A man in a sharp suit, holding a briefcase. The man approached Jake, extending a hand. Mr. Reynolds. I'm Agent Moore, with the FBI. We've been investigating Ms. Thompson for months. Your evidence just helped us build our case. We'll be in touch. Jake shook his hand, stunned. Lena whispered, Looks like your little HOA nightmare is turning into a federal case. Jake looked back at his home. His real home again. This isn't over, Agent Moore said quietly. But you've won the first battle. Jake smiled, exhausted but victorious. For now, the garage was his again. The trucks were gone, and Karen's shadow had lifted. But one thing was clear. When at HOA, Karen tries to steal your home illegally. Even if you're not in the HOA, the fight to reclaim your life is only just beginning.